Everybody, welcome to another tutorial lesson. In this one, we're going to go over higher quality renders using Blender 3.4 and 3.5. I would prefer it if you were in 3.5, you can use the light tree function, which is going to help with your indirect lighting sources in your scene. I'm going to have this blend file available for everybody so you can get in. It's just a very simple render. I've done a little bit of compositing to create a semi-photorealistic scene here with actual textures, okay? And I'm using path guiding, I'm using the light tree, and like I said, I'm using a little bit of compositing as well, so we can get into all of this, and I'll show you how to get started. Now, this is going to be, the focus of this tutorial isn't just photorealism, it's aim small, miss small. So in other words, what that means is if you start a project, don't start a huge project. Start a really small one till you get better. So that way, when you totally screw it up, or you don't do good, or you spent a long time on a scene and then rendered it and everything is out of whack because you have too much in the scene, you're just trying to focus on too much, then you lose big. So why not lose small in the beginning and start out with something easy? Now just remember, the more things you put into your scene, the more things you have to make look good. And when I say look good, I mean if it's going to be photorealistic and you've got a seam like I have right here, and I can easily fix that. People pick up on that. They're going to see it. They're going to see the little tiny imperfections, the things that you don't want anybody to see. And so we will do a little emphasis here with the reflection of the model, which for me, it gives me this little sense of completion look at the model because I know what's behind it and I can see it. And it's done in a way that doesn't take your eyes off of the scene. Also, I'm using some depth of field. Okay, enough blah, blah, blah. Let's jump right in. All right, guys, number one, you got a brand new scene here. Let's go ahead, Control S, and let's save this as a beta test with light tree. Name it whatever you want, and make sure to save that. Now you've got a save point. You can just hit Control S whenever you want. If you want a bigger screen, hit Control Spacebar if you're doing some modeling. So first thing I want to actually do is I want to immediately set up the model. I want the plane, and I want my light in the scene right away. So if I get the lights and everything in there, I can start adjusting things in a better way. So I'm going to delete the cube, drop in a plane, scale it up a little bit, does not really matter. Let's see if I can turn that back to studio. It's a little bright. And now I'm going to drop in the UV sphere, G and Z, kind of bring it up. Snap is on for some reason. And I want it to be about like that. And then I definitely want it to be right on top of the plane. I'm going to take a slight rotation. And then what I want to do is I'll just / with this. I'm going to jump into edit mode, go to edge select, and I'm going to select a few of these rungs. Yeah, I like that. That's good enough. So I'll hit Control B, and I'm going to create a slight bevel. Then in my quick favorites with Q, which you should highly recommend you should use that, I'm going to extrude faces along normals. Now I want to do that inward just a little bit, and now with edge select I can come in and I want to select all of these outside loops for the cuts I just made, and Control B, and I can bevel these as well. And just one little quick thought here, be careful if you try to extrude this a couple times. What you're going to do is you're going to have an extrusion there underneath it and it will not bevel. So I'll hit Control B, and I'm going to run it up with 2 extra segments. Then you can pull your little bevel menu up over here, and you can click on harden normals, and that will remove any little shading issues you have in here. And jump back out into object mode, shade that bad boy, smooth, come down, and you can turn on auto smooth if it helps you. All right, so now we've got our basic shape. I'm going to / back out. Don't forget to do that. Now over here, I just want to drop in a plane. I'm going to rotate that on the X, and I'm going to immediately throw a camera in my scene, if it'll let me. You know, sometimes Blender gets really funky and you have to minimize and then maximize the screen again. Now you can also go over to your camera settings. You can bring this down to like 44 if you want to capture just a little bit more of that. Now for depth of field, we're going to go ahead and click that on now. And our focus object can be the sphere or whatever you want it to be. You can even put a dummy object in here. Something even off, slightly off to the side if you want to cause some neat little blurry effects. Now with the f-stop, you're going to have to look at that in a more of a rendered mode. So let's immediately start working on this lighting. I'm just going to do something simple. I'm going to come over to the world properties. I'm going to click the color, and what I want to do is grab the sky texture. It's going to potentially just wash everything out. Make sure I got scene lights and scene world on. I'm not going to touch any of that because generally speaking, these are the natural lights that are, don't mess with your strength, don't mess with your intensity so much. What you really want to do is scroll all the way down, and you want to go into the render properties, doing that, and scroll all the way down to color management. I recommend filmic and high contrast, and then you can start bringing your exposure down a little bit. And what that's going to do is it's going to kind of correct your light issues because you don't want everything washed out. When you're out, if you're taking pictures, and I have my mom, professional photographer, picked up a few things from her, starting to come back to me now as I'm doing the 3D modeling tutorials, and some of those things like the emphasis through reflection, different things like that, and balancing out your scenes. You know, when you're going out and you're taking pictures of things, you're fighting stuff like this in the real world, so you can't just raise or lower the lights outside. You've got what you got. But once it's in the 3D viewport, here you can play around with the exposure a little bit and get some better results. And we're going to tweak a few more settings as well. And if you're in 3.5, you're going to have the option, if you go to CPU rendering, to click on path guiding. Choose 128 samples to 256. I've now got at least two, if not three different tutorials that kind of go over path guiding. And I've been getting into the light tree as well. This has a threshold setting, but if you go ahead and click on light tree, it's going to more correctly emphasize your indirect lighting, and it's going to make it pop. That's the best way I can explain it. And if you check out one of my previous videos that I just did, and I do a contrast with two different renders, one without path guiding and light tree and one with, and the proper lighting coming from the lamps, you know, the nice orange glow on the wall, it looked good. I'll actually just go ahead and jump over to my video and show you. The setup here was with the path guiding and with the light tree, and it shows you the material is getting the light, and then the textures coming out in those areas where it would not normally do that with regular rendering. You have to take this out into Photoshop. And obviously, you know, the professional sense, you still have to go out to Photoshop, but now you've got an option to do more in the 3D viewport. Alright, now I'm going to use Blender Kit for this, and I'm just going to pull up something like dry ground under the materials tab, and you can literally choose whatever you want. I'm just going to go with the exact same thing I had in the beginning, and let's go ahead, split the screen. I'll pull up the UV editor. I want to grab this and actually unwrap it. I hit A for all. And I want to do a UV smart project on this. I'm going to bring the island margin up to 0.05, and I will bring this one up to 0.02 for the area weight. And what that's going to do is align our UVs better. And what we want are these bigger areas where the stretching and things like that would normally occur. We want those to be a little bit bigger. So now I'm going to pack, if I can get it to do it. There we go. So now I'll go ahead and pack these islands. It just corrects it a little bit, makes it project better. Now another fun thing you can do is you can play with the anisotropy, and I'm not going to go into details, but it is a value of 0, and or a value of 1. And it works amazing with glass and lighting and caustics. So if you want to throw the light from the front to the back, you're more than welcome to play with that. And the Blender manual will have some more information on it. It's not necessarily pert to this tutorial, so I'm not going to mess with it, but it's 0 or 1. Don't do one or the other. Don't do don't put it in the middle. This is not like a mixed shader, okay? So 1 or 0. Now if you find that you've blurred things out too much with the f-stop, what you can do is you can just make a couple of adjustments. 2.8 is kind of like where it starts, and I can bring that down. And what I would want to do is necessarily bring this into very clear focus, because that's where I want anybody's eye to go that's looking at this. And don't forget to get in there and change your rotations around for your sun. 2 lights in the scene now, so if you want to change where the shadows are, you're going to need to also move the spotlight. And if you find it's a little too bright, you don't like that, then you can change the settings for that just a little bit. Now, final parting thoughts on this. We're going to jump into the compositor. It's going to take a lot of time for anybody to get good at this, and we're all trying to perfect our craft, whatever it is that we really like doing the most. So keep that in mind. And like I said, aim small, miss small, aim big, miss big. And start out with a tiny little project like this and get the free bag of pie add-ons where you can just throw stuff in the scene and start testing it. Don't put a whole ton of stuff in there. The view layers here, and what I want to do is we're going to put in a glossy indirect, and then we'll render those as such. Now if you come over here and you want to set up a little bit better, I'm going to put mine to 200 samples, CPU compute. I'm going to turn open shading language off. We don't have any OSL shaders in here. And make sure that you're set up good. Your denoise, check that. Albedo normal, optics if you've got it, whatever your denoiser is. 128 is where I'm going to go. I'm also going to, with the path guiding, I'm going to render the light inside of the volume. And I'm going to have the light tree on. And if you happen to move in the scene somewhere, you can turn on motion blur. It's going to make things look a heck of a lot better. And then you can come down here, and I'm on high contrast filmic sRGB, and then you kind of play around with the settings till you get something you like. And I'm turning my volume density down to 0.05. And I think it's important you take these things a step at a time, because you're not going to be a pro in a day, you're not going to be a pro in a month, you're not going to be a pro in a year. It's going to take years. Like, I've got another trade, and I've been doing that trade as a day job for 19 years, and I'm good at it, and there's not a whole lot I don't know about it, even though I'm still learning. But the thing is, you just take it slowly, don't beat yourself up, don't get frustrated, take a walk away from the computer, grab a cup of coffee, take a nap, don't worry, come back the next day. Blender is going to be there. And the things that are changing are going to be gobbled up by the people who do the node tutorials, and they're going to, put out some amazing material for you. But the thing is, not everybody's telling you to just take it easy. Yeah, crunch. I put in 13 to 15 hours a day on my days off, smashing tutorials and doing things, and some of them pop, some of them don't, whatever. As long as it's helping people, I'm 100%. So I know I'm rambling, but I just want to kind of like drive home the point that you learn this piece by piece. You try things, you try to figure stuff out, you don't beat yourself up over it. It's just not worth it. And what I will do is I'll render this, and I want to double check my settings. 200 is good. That's good. Everything's good. I will render this, and then we're going to immediately jump back in and go to the compositor. So take your time, whatever your render takes. If you come back tomorrow, you come back tomorrow. Rather jump into the compositor with something good than something that you only did 5 samples on. So control middle mouse, and I can adjust this out a little bit. I don't like how big the ground texture is, but it's really just a fill for this, because I want you guys to get some more understanding of path guiding of light trees, setting up a small scene, cover your mistakes with volumetrics till you get a little bit better, learn how to build things out, correct your shadows, correct your lighting, and overall have fun doing this, because this is a ton of fun. And I'll see you guys on the other side of the render. Alright, so here we go. Here's my final result. I ended up doing that in 4K. Didn't realize it was set to 4K, but here we are. I know I've got some seams in here. I'm really not worried about all that stuff right now. So what we can do is jump over into the compositor. I'm going to drop this screen out, remove some of this stuff. I'm going to go ahead and vertically split, and I'm just going to pull up an image editor. I'm going to come down here to this little drop down slot, type in view, click the viewer node, so that when we pull up our compositing nodes, that will pop up. So click use nodes, turn off the backdrop, don't need it, and we've got a render sitting here, right? So it's going to pop up. So if I hit Control Shift left click, whatever is there is what's going to be represented in the viewer. So I have to open this up a little bit more. It's going to be tedious, but I want to be able to see the edges because we're going to composite this a little bit. Now what we can do is kind of pull the composite node over here, pull the viewer node over here, and what I want to do is drop in, and I'll spacebar search this, in alpha over, and I will drop in the alpha over node, make sure that goes into the compositor. And now I want to put in a couple of step down nodes plus a mix, so we can mix these other things all together. And I want to spacebar type in blur, and we can bring in a blur node. I'll bring the glossy indirect here, and I want to bring that output for the image to the top. So that is just how this is going to work. And if I bring the Control Shift left click viewer node here, see a slight little render bar down there where it works. So if you just start kind of clicking around, you'll see what is actually being enhanced. Now we do want to switch this from Gaussian to fast Gaussian. I'm going to switch it to relative as well, and you can choose the aspect correction, X or Y, does not matter. And I'm going to start off with 0.01, and we can actually, so you can kind of see what's going on a little better here. Let's do this a little better. This is the light we're working with. So if I blur this out and give it a second to composite, I always say render, but it's compositing, you'll see what it's blurring out. It's blurring out that light, right? So, and I don't want a huge effect, so maybe 0.5 or so. Give that just a second, and that's pretty blurry. And that's just kind of another way to enhance the depth of field a little bit. Alright, so with all of that connected, the only thing I'm going to really do, I'm going to keep this very simple, is for this particular glare, I just want to kind of bring this up to 1, and I'm going to step it back from there a little bit and see how that looks. See, it's pretty blurry, so I don't really like that. Let's cut that in half and try 0.5. Nah, it's not too bad, but I'm thinking like I just want to drag it down to like 0.1. I just want a very slight blur in there. Yeah, it's not too bad. 0.3 it is. I'm going to cut the middle of that. There we go. That's what I was looking for. So now under the compositor, and let's switch back over. Let's see what we look like ultimately here. Looks pretty good. That's like slightly out of focus, as it should be. Now what I want to do as well is let's throw a couple of other nodes in here, and one of those is going to be a lens distortion, and this is just one of those things you want to use very sparingly. So let's go in here to distort and just look around till you see lens distortion. You can pop that in, and I will put the viewer to the lens distortion. Now what we want to do is let's test this out. Let's put that to 3 on the distortion, and you can see what that does. We really don't need it to do that much. Also, you're going to want to check fit, and it distorts it, but it's like this fisheye almost kind of zoom in. So I want that to be pretty sparing, so I could put that to like 0.5 0.5-ish. And then the dispersion, better known as chromatic aberration and or color fringing. So the outside, like if you take a picture with a normal camera, you know, it kind of distorts the edges, and what happens is that colors are kind of bent the wrong way by the lens, and so it distorts the outside edges. And ultimately what it's going to do is it's going to cause a mismatch in the colors on the edges. And I say it's like, if you take a picture with a regular camera, it's not going to be perfect, and you're going to get that. So you want to add things like this. So does chromatic aberration and or dispersion, the way it calls it here, but professionally you would call that chromatic aberration. And so I'll bring this up a little bit, and you can see what it's doing is kind of, we'll just call it flaring and blurring the sides. And that's when the light is hitting the lens incorrectly and bending, and it doesn't really know what to do. It's natural. And so you actually want some of that, but you want a very, very small amount of that. And I think something like 0.5 would probably be good for that as well. And just kind of see how that goes. 0.05. I'm gonna really crack it down because I don't need that much. Okay, so there's a little bit here. Not detecting. Yeah, see, you've got plenty. There's plenty there. This is something just to, the eye will pick it up in photography. If you're looking at a picture, your eye is going to see it. So actually I want to change this 0.07. And that is my final answer. There we go. So that gives me just a little extra on the sides. Now if you want, the compositor has a filter as well. So if you shift A and go to filters and grab filter, you can box sharpen this. And I'll put the viewer on there so you can see it. Technically, and it's compositing, technically that is just going to be a huge amount of sharpening. Let me get a spot here where you can really see what's going on. I wouldn't want that much, so I'll bring this back to like 0.5-ish. And I'll let that composite. And it really needs to be subtle. So like the lowest possible setting you can get away with and actually have something slightly noticeable. There we go, that's good. Alright, so that about wraps it up. That is my final render, and it does show in your final here. So you go ahead and save that, and just understand if you add a bunch of stuff to the scene, you're gonna have to make all that stuff look good. If you add a bunch of lights, you're gonna have to do tons and tons of adjustments. So as always, keep it super simple in the beginning when you learn more. And obviously there are tons of amazing tutorials out there on this, you know, so you can't just depend on one person. I wish I could just literally put out the tutorial that just blesses everyone and it's it. You only need my tutorial. But it's not true, and everybody needs a teacher that's gonna speak to them, and someone that just kind of hits home, someone maybe explains a little better, someone goes fast, doesn't explain, because they come from old school, they're in Maya, they've been doing this for 15-20 years, you know, and they just need you to just go tell me, you know. And then some people need a little bit more of a walkthrough. So hopefully you guys got something out of that. As always, I appreciate you guys watching. Subscribe, smash that like button, and I will keep you guys updated with the new, what's going to hopefully be soon, will be the path guiding with the GPU instead of just the CPU. So have a great day. Happy 2023, and I'll see you guys in the next tutorial lesson.